Okay, immersive audio transports you in space and time, reveals compelling stories, and opens up a new dimension in the world around you. Specializing in sound recording and audio production for radio and podcast documentaries, audio guides, films, and games, I've been working with audio for 16 years. My work has appeared on BBC, Australian Broadcasting, various NPR stations and podcasts, ranging from Lady Killers with Lucy Worsley to True Spies, to Bird Note, to Proof, America's Test Kitchen, to Obsessed with the Quest, a narratorless series for BBC Radio 4. And as I say, I discovered her because she had been on a residency in Shanghai, where she had created some sound walks. And she says, she invites you to discover touring Asian megacities of Shanghai and Seoul, because when you explore them with your ears, your experience is quite different. So tell us a little bit about the residency in Shanghai. How did that come about? And yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. As I say in the beginning of the piece that I made for what was Soundproof on Australian Radio National at the time, I was flipping through a Smithsonian magazine and it had this cover story and this picture of the city, and it looked fascinating. It looked so massive. And I just had this thought, what does all that sound like? And then online, by chance, SoundCloud, actually, I made friends with someone, American audio guy who was based there, lived there, had a family there. We got chatting and he told me about the residency. I applied thinking I'd have no chance. But I was canny about the time I applied because I applied at the least popular time of the year. And so I actually got picked and I spent 4 months there living in this, what was a cross between the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, and a boutique luxury hotel on the Bund with a roof terrace that looked across the Huangpu River to that big classic modern Shanghai skyline with the Oriental Pearl Tower. And I had no idea what I was going to do as a sound project. So I basically went out almost every day with my sound kit and I explored all the different aspects of the city that you could hear. I didn't go to formal music performances mostly. I explored what you could hear on the streets, in the parks, by the river. Last thing at night, first thing in the morning, street markets, modern shopping malls, the inside of the Jingmao Tower with this giant of the 40-story atrium. What the heck did all of that sound like? And it was only the last month I really figured out what I was going to do. And I decided to make a kind of semi-walking guide to the city, which is on my website in the sound field. And it's got some Chinese characters on the website title as well, because I originally made it, just for that project. I decided, the suggestion of my friend Terence, who had helped me get the residency, I made it bilingual in English and Mandarin. And I don't speak any Mandarin. In fact, I tried to learn a bit and I just failed horribly. But what I did do was, through social media and adverts, I found a bilingual English Mandarin speaker who was in the city at that time. And I think I paid a small amount of money to narrate that. I made it was a very short guide, and we just literally, I would say a sentence or two in English and she would translate into Mandarin. And so you can hear it that way. And I would say, heads up to, if you're making walking guides that are appropriate for other languages, it's not as hard as you might think. If you are not able to do the language yourself, find someone who is. I just came across a great guy on LinkedIn the other day. I went to listen to his sound reel, and he is fluent in English, French, Spanish. Although he he sounds great. And so I would say, if you can get some funding, and there's any reason to make it in more languages than just English, have a look into putting some funding into your, getting some funding for that too, and pay someone to help you with that. It's a really fun experience. And I don't know that much Spanish, but I made a museum audio guide a few years ago for the entire permanent collection of this Western museum down near Phoenix. And then they said, oh, can you do a version in Spanish? And I was really scared, the prospect of doing that. found someone to translate the written, to translate the script I already had into Spanish and to read it for me. And then I knew enough Spanish, it turned out, to edit the audio. So it's a really great feeling when you can provide a piece that you've made in a different language, if and when that's appropriate. So I would say, don't be scared, just get some help if you need to, and you'll be amazed what kind of help there is out there. So
Can I jump in? Can I
yeah.
jump in and ask about the residency? The residency
Yes.
went on in Shanghai. Was that
Yes.
something that you got paid as well? Did you get a stipend?
They pay your airfare. They pick you up in a black limousine, and they provide you with a room that is either with a separate studio. Mine was massive. I took a hula hoop with me because I like doing a bit of hula hooping. I could do a whole hula hoop routine in this studio. They called it the atelier, which was also the bedroom with a bathroom. So the accommodation and breakfast and the airfare was included, and that was it. So I was horribly broke after 4 months when I got back, because I'd hoped I'd make working contacts in Shanghai and get some paid work. And that was not possible. That was very hard to do. And I hadn't realized that, and I hadn't thought ahead and had some projects I could have been working on part-time to keep some income coming in. But at the same time, it freed up my time to just totally immerse myself in the sounds of this city of 25 million people, So, yeah.
So
that's how it worked. And there were 18 artists in residence at any one time. And I think a minimum residency was 3 months and maximum was 6. And you just apply. If you go on Swatch, which is the Swiss watch company, Swatch Art Piece Hotel, they have an application process. There are lots of artist residencies all over the world, and they range from ones like that, where you get either travel or free accommodation or both, to paid ones where you actually get a stipend, to ones where you have to pay for everything. So it's basically an art hotel that you pay for. So there's all sorts of artist residencies. If you ever have a gap in your schedule, or you retire or quit a job and you've got some time and some cash, look into artist residencies. It can be wonderful. And sound tends to be underrepresented. Many artist residencies are more for visual arts, but there's always some that will, have sound artists, so yeah, that's how it worked.
Well, I mean, the one thing that we all know, those of us who compose sound walks, is the amount of time and effort you put into it. And you so rarely get recompense for that. So, how's it been for you? I mean, are you someone who's always in paid work, or are you...
No, for example, I'll be honest with you here. For the first 6 months of this year, I had no audio work whatsoever. I was writing scripts sporadically for one wonderful client, UK-based client, for his podcast series. And I was really struggling to find anything. And I applied for a lot of advertised positions and work and didn't get anything. And then all of a sudden, August rolls around and suddenly I had 2 projects, and I'm quite busy at the moment. And so it really is that what they say, feast and famine. And that's a nice segue, Andrew. And I just wanted to mention working for free, because you'd mentioned people might want to hear a bit about that. And I got this quote from Mark Twain, which said, "When work is a pleasure, life is a joy. When work is duty, life is slavery." And so how do you balance? Because we all have to, or most of us are not independently wealthy, so we have to make a living. How do you balance joy and slavery? And so, sometimes work is a pleasure and you're getting paid for it, and that's great. But, I asked Chris Watson, because I went very early on in my sound recording career, I went on one of his long weekend wildlife sound recording training workshops down in Norfolk. And I've kept in touch with him over the years. And I asked him once over email what his view was on doing work for free, because I'd been approached by this European art project. Some big project was going on in Paris or Barcelona, and they wanted some audio for that, but they wanted me to provide it for free. And I asked Chris Watson, and he said I could do work for free almost every day of the week, almost every week of the year. He said, people always will want stuff for free, but I don't do it. So my view on this is, be very careful what you do for free. If it's a project that's so full of joy, you don't mind it and you don't actually need the money, I would do that to a certain extent, or if it's for a really good cause, a charity or cause that you espouse, that they literally don't have any money to pay you, I would do a little bit of that. But I would caution against doing too much of that kind of work, because it takes your time, it takes your energy. And if you're providing a service for free, where there might be a possibility of someone getting paid money to do that, do you really want to take work away from people who need the money, and I feel like doing too much work for free, it kind of downgrades you. It's like, are you really, don't work for free unless there's a really good reason for it, and you're not taking good paying jobs away from someone, because some people really do need to earn the money, and you don't want to give the impression that you're so cheap that you're just giving it away, is what I'd say. But one thing I do for free is my what I call a podcast. I don't have an RSS feed for it yet, but in the Soundfield, which is on Instagram and also on my website in thesoundfield.com. I've got what I call a podcast. It's actually a blog page with audio. And the reason I do that is because I just do it when I have time and feel like it. It's been great in honing my mixing skills. It's given me a showcase for a lot of the sounds I have in my sound library that I've never used on a production yet. And it's like, oh, people really need to hear that sound of what it was like underground in a prairie dog burrow, what the pups sounded like underground. And I never had a reason to use that sound. I'm just going to make a little, 3-minute podcast piece about it and put it up, and it's fascinating, I think, and fun. So, and it's I feel like it's hopefully a good advertisement and portfolio for my skills that people might come across and then want to hire me. So those are the situations when I would work for free, when it's a little pet project, something that might be difficult to get funding for, at least in the beginning, and you're really learning something from it. I would say, yeah, work for free, but be very selective, I would say, when you agree to work for free. And there's a whole spectrum of views on this, but that's just my sense of it. So
what about your tell us a bit more about your location recording and how you go about doing location recording, and why you think it's so important.
Well, it's very sporadic. So sometimes, especially in the earlier years, I would have some free time and I would just go on a trip. I've been based either in here in the mountains of Arizona or in northern England, in Lancashire, where my parents lived until they both died. I was going back to visit, spend time with them regularly, so I was splitting my time between those two places. Whenever I got some free time, I would go on a trip, either just out for a day in the car and walk somewhere, or I'd go on a few days in Arizona and camp out. And I'd record stuff. And then occasionally, say I'd get a job for a week. BBC paid me a couple of times to go and do some wildlife soundscape recording for a project they've been doing. So I've recorded what they needed, and that's gone into my sound library. And then I've collected other things as well, and then just fun trips anywhere. I mean, if I go on a bike ride somewhere, like I go a lot, it's just an hour's drive up to the south rim of the Grand Canyon from here, so I'll drive up there and park outside the national park with the bike in the back of the car. I'll jump on the bike and cycle along the rim, and I'll have my a small audio recorder in the pannier on my bike with me. I've cycled across Korea, across and around Korea 3 of the 4 times I've been there. In fact, I've been there 4 times. I always have my sound kit with me, but 3 of those times I was on a bike most of the time, and I had a stripped down sound kit with me. So yeah, partly for work and partly for just any fun trips, I always have a sound recorder with me. And if I hear anything interesting, it might be a wonderful echo going through an urban bike trail underpass in Phoenix somewhere. I'll record that,
Yeah, so tell us, well, I mean, I don't know whether you want to play any clips or whether you want people to listen to anything in particular at this point. But what I was going to ask you about is, what is your standard sound kit for traveling on a bicycle in Korea? Because when we first corresponded, that was what you told me. You said, oh, you couldn't actually do a cafe before you'd come, because you were planning yet another cycle across Korea. And I was going, crikey, how how far does this woman travel? So tell us a little bit about what you take when you're on bicycle.
Yeah. So one of my sound devices recorders, I've got a couple. I've got they're really old now, 702. And that I took that fell across out of the bike bag and skittered across the road one time in Korea when I was on my cycle touring trip from Seoul to Busan, and it was bomb-proof actually because it was fine, didn't damage it at all. But since then I've also got a Mix Pre 6, and that's a bit smaller and a bit lighter. So typically one of those, typically the Mix Pre 6. It's the microphones, isn't it? It's really hard to travel light with a giant windjammer. And some set, a shotgun mic or so I use miniature omnis typically. I love the DPA 4060s, and that's what I mostly use on those kind of trips. I'm dying to get a pair of clippies because everyone says how great they are, and I've heard the effects of those on the Wildlife Sound Recording Society. A lot of those recordings in those meetings are made with clippies, so I must get a pair. But small mics, omnis, and you can take a small windjammer and put them inside that if you've got space in your kit. And actually, those windjammers, they can make useful kind of underwear and sock storage to go pack in your luggage, so they pack down. But what I often do is I wear these mics head mounted over my ears, so I'm recording in binaural essentially, and I have a Rycote fur set of earmuffs.
Well, okay,
so I wear them and I stick the Soundman windshielding over my ears, and it looks pretty funny when it's warm on a beach and you're walking around with a fur earmuffs.
Well, maybe that's a good opportunity to find out who we've got in the room and find out what kit they use and why, what they're recording and what they're producing. So should we do that? Should we do it in kind of alphabetical order? And just tell us who you are. Say whether you have a general interest, whether you're a producer or a recordist or whatever, and maybe if you are, tell us what's your go-to piece of kit that you'd recommend people use or try. So going in alphabetical order, we've got Anne-Marie.
Okay, well, I'm probably the least technical person here. So whenever I record sound, I just use my iPhone, and I've got various sound recording apps on my phone. I just record things in the street. I mean, one of the things is I'm always like to be quite surreptitious, so I don't like people to see me. And I was actually going to ask you, Diane, when you were in China, did you ever get asked by the authorities what you were doing? And because I know people have just taken photos in nightclubs in China and have been told to delete them and that sort of thing. So I was just wondering, did you have some sort of pass to say, I'm here as an artist? And
well, they were definitely monitoring all the artists in residence at Swatch Art Piece Hotel. And I felt several times out on the street that I was being watched. After the first week of using my normal kit, like a microphone and a windjammer with a dead cat fur cover on it, I just gave up with that because people either avoided me like the plague or they came up to me and asked me what I was doing. And Terence Loren, who had already encountered this, had come up with a great method, which was what I used, which was wearing microphones over his ears and just making it look like he had headphones in.
Right.
So this binaural recording, and so this stealth recording, I'm totally with you there, Anne-Marie. And I use my phone a lot, but I plug in a binaural headset into the phone and record using that, rather than just using the iPhone mics. Although they're getting better all the time, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, mine's not professional at all. It's usually to record stuff for my own writing or something like that. But yes. And to me, the ultimate thing is even recording surreptitious snippets of conversations in cafes where I think, oh my God, this is so fantastic. I have to borrow from this. But I did see recently I've just been in Venice, and there was a big scandal in Italy about the culture minister had hired someone who it turned out had been his girlfriend. And as a special events consultant or something. And one of the reasons that they got caught out was because she had this pair of these new things, which I only found out about them because of this story, of these, they're called Ray-Ban headliners.
Oh, yes.
New form of, sunglasses, like you can get them as sunglasses or regular glasses, and they have very surreptitious mic and video in them. They just look like the screws in the phone. She was going around with him, just recording everything that they did and posting it. I don't think he knew this, but she was posting it on her Instagram feed. So if you want to be surreptitious, get yourself a pair of those. Maybe we should get some. Andrew, what do you think, for Walk, Listen, Create?
Might be worth a try.
But I'm looking to go into binaural recording, and I'm just wondering what might be the best type of setup to have. It's just something that I'm interested in for my own recordings going ahead. Like in the past, I've worked for the local radio, and I've just used Miranda like that and partners. But for binaural, I just wondering, Diane, what would you recommend?
Well, I haven't actually held a pair of Clippies yet, but those seem very good. Depends. Are you going to put it on a dummy head? You've got two options. You can, if you're not going to buy a really expensive $8,000 Neumann, official binaural headset, you can get a dummy head. And you can mount microphones in it, and probably best to use small omnis for that. Just the best quality omnis that you can get. Like I say, I've been using DPA 4060s. Turns out they're not ideal for lower level ambient soundscape recording, especially if you're doing wildlife or something, because they're noise floor. There's microphones now that have a lower noise floor, like there's other microphones. But just a pair, preferably a matched pair of good quality miniature omnis, and then you can either wear them, figure out a way of wearing them, and you'll have to or put them on a dummy head, and if you're going to work in anything other than a very light breeze, you'll need to work out a way of windshielding them, and that's how I do it. And I've used both. I have two beautiful dummy heads, one's a guy and one's a girl, and I've got a third one who's for sale, actually. If anyone's struggling to find an interesting looking dummy head. She's a woman with long hair, long brunette.
You don't have a pet name for her, do you?
Yeah, I do have names for them, yeah.
And just out of interest, I was looking potentially, I don't know if you're aware of it, there's a make, and it's off binaural microphone 3DO. Have you heard about them?
Yes, I have heard of them. I think they're quite good. I would look at the technical specifications of anything you're going to buy. If you're going to be recording quite loud sounds and a lot of conversation with your binaural setup, the noise floor doesn't matter so much. But if you want to record nature and quieter sounds and not have a lot of hiss, you really want to get something that's got as low a noise floor as possible.
I've tried and used various different ones over the years in terms of recorders, but the thing I like to carry around, which unfortunately is discontinued, is this, which is the Sony PCM M10. And it's really great. It's still going after many years. I would say, well, actually, it's not so many. Maybe it might be, what are we in 2024? Might be 7 or 8 years old now, I guess, something like that. And then the binaural set that I have. I also have a MixPre 6 that Di mentioned, and the only issue with, obviously it's like sound device is very well built and everything, but that series doesn't offer any protection against rain or water whatsoever. So
no.
So unlike the 702s and stuff like that, we're a bit more resilient to splashes and stuff like that than these are. So that's something worth bearing in mind. So
I've kayaked with mine last summer. I was going to this unusually dry summer lake that was full of water because we'd had so much snow that winter, and I was kayaking with it, and it was nip and tuck a few times. I had to be really careful.
Yeah. So this is the binaural set that I have, but you can't really see what they look like because I've taken some. These are intended for lapel mics, but I put them over the. So these are like entry level binaurals, and I got them because I wanted to try and experiment with binaural without spending too much money.
Yeah.
And they're very, and I've never got any other ones.
What's the make then, Ed?
They're the Roland
Roland.
CS10EM, and they're very surreptitious. They look like really old. You actually look like you can't even afford modern up-to-date earbuds. You know, they're like these wired, old-school looking things, but very sensitive to wind. So you usually need to use these things. So that's what I have.
Yeah.
And a shotgun mic and like a reporter mic for like interviews and stuff like that.
So I suppose I'm just kind of an interested person. So that's why I kind of wanted to join the cafe today. I'm a freelance producer for World Service and Radio 4, Radio 3. So I just suppose I wanted to have a listen to what you were saying, Diane, in case I could improve my own recording skills in the future. I might potentially be recording in a sauna. I don't know whether you have any recommendations for that.
Yeah, I've got a Sennheiser shotgun. I took that to Panama with me in the middle of the rainy season. I'm not sure it's quite as hot and steamy as a sauna. You want something that is proven to deal with humidity well in that kind of situation. So I would suggest some, one of the Sennheiser shotguns. I have the 418S.
I've got the M6.
Right, I'm not sure. I can't speak for that. I've not used that, but a Sennheiser shotgun. Those are typically that'll handle humidity. Should handle your humidity okay.
Okay. All right.
And record in short bursts. I think that might help. Check that. Check that everything's okay.
Yeah. Hit record often. So if everything goes pear shaped with the humidity down there, once you've been in there a while, at least you'll have, the initial stuff will be saved rather than waiting for 45 minutes and trying to save and then find that humidity's affected you.
Yes.
I'm fascinated. Are these, these sort of people you are going to interview or something in a sauna? Is that the idea?
I hope so. It was an idea I pitched to Radio 4, which made it through to the second round and then they rejected it. So we've refashioned it for the World Service, and I'm hoping that it go through, but who knows?
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, it'd be fascinating. I did hear a recording of the chess players in the spa in Budapest. I can't remember who made that, but I found it somewhere on the internet, and it was just bizarre. But that was, it was hot water they were sitting in, but it wasn't it wasn't an enclosed space because it's out in the open air. So it had probably didn't have quite so many difficulties to consider.
So I use these binaural mics by Soundman. They're based in Berlin.
Yeah,
if you've come across them. I also use the kind of earmuffs for when I'm outside to stop the wind.
I was talking about those earlier. They're good.
Yeah, I find the Soundman ones quite sort of stiff, so I was quite interested that Ryco they do them. Somebody also recommended these, so I've got these. They're ones that work with an iPhone.
Yeah, Ambio. Yeah, it's hard. They're getting harder to buy now. Because they stopped producing them. Yeah,
they do the thing where they're, so the Soundman ones are also in your ear, very small, and it looks like you're just doing a normal thing. But they're really good. I find the sound quality really good. And the recording thing, which actually I wouldn't recommend, is the Zoom H8. So as you can see, I have got really small hands, but it's just really big and quite plasticky. So the Zoom H6, if you get them even secondhand, they're pretty good. And the Zoom H4Ns, they were really strong, but you have to use quite small cards with memory cards with them, so they're a bit tricky. So I'm interested in the other ones working. And then I do lots of interviews, so I use a Sennheiser shotgun mic and a clip-on DPA mic.
My background's more in video. So I used to work quite a lot as a video journalist and a filmmaker, but I've been getting more and more interested in audio, and I'm doing a course with In the Dark at the moment. I mostly use Zoom H4n. I'd like to upgrade that to an H6, partly just because it would work better with my shotguns, but
I'd say upgrade to a sound devices. You'll get better preamps.
sure. Okay. I'll look into that.
And you can
Alright.
sometimes pick up a Mix Pre 3 or a Mix Pre 6 used. You know, you don't always have to buy brand new gear. I got my Mix Pre 6 used.
Right, okay. Sweet. I will look into that. I have looked at those before. That looks pretty good.
I think the preamps are just better than in the Zooms. That's what people who've got more experience than me have told me.
So I have a lot of trouble since I'm from my cell phone, and I cannot handle Zoom from the cell phone. So, well, I cannot have it in the computer because the computer became very slow, and from the cell phone, all the buttons are hidden. So, what I have to say, well, I appreciate a lot. Thank you for coming to Walk September, because I appreciate a lot. Get have a knowledge of your website and your podcasts. So I really love the way the quality of the sound is amazing, and the way you build the narratives from the sounds and from the scenes that you are that you show there. So I become very addicted. So I will try to listen them all, and in fact, it's very important to have a very good quality of sound, because you feel the sound inside of you. It's amazing, the layers. We feel the layers of that you put in your recording. So that for me is important, because I had some ear problems when I was a kid, and I don't have the sense of direction of the sound, so I listen to something different, which I don't know what it is, because I always listen like this. But they say that I don't have stereophony in my in my head, so I don't know what that really means. But the quality of the sounds is becoming wonderful, and that your recordings are amazing. So thank you for offering them to us. It's just a very interesting part of this conversation. Hear you about talking about paid work and unpaid work, and it's,
oh, thank you, Miguel. That's very kind of you. Really appreciate that.
yeah. You remember when there was the Hippocrates, the medicine, the doctors should do they swear to the Hippocrates that they should always taking care of the health of the people, having the money or not having money. So, but nowadays that if you are a doctor, you have to pay for everything and else more. But this is like same thing is like healing, something that could heal you, and sometimes that pleasure you have in your work, so you can pass them through the sounds, and that is good. Of course, if we don't have to pay them, and we feel that we enjoy that, we feel that choice part. So it's grateful. So thank you. And I'm not a great sound recorder, because I don't have quality recorders or micros or something. But it's something that will interest me a lot, and I hope next. I work mainly with visual arts, so I'm a very visual, but I feel things more sometimes more listening to things than the ability of expression for me is sometimes more natural with sounds than with pictures. So, but since I didn't have the training from child, so it's very difficult for me to express with sound. So I really I understand the way you compose your stuff, but for me, I would like someday to do something in that way. But this for me, it's like, oh, it's like to learning to speak again, or learning to read again. So it's something very 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 far away. But never know what we are going to. So thank you a lot.
No, thank you very much. I would like to say a quick plug here, but I do offer coaching on both improving your location recording. Fiona, you'd mentioned that, and also how if you already got great sound recordings, but you're not quite sure how to craft a narrative around them. I do offer that too. Angel Perez Grandi, who's part of a Wildlife Sound Recording Society, who couldn't be here today, I gave him a bit of coaching last year, and his piece that he made with a bit of help, coaching help input from me, won best documentary in the wildlife sound recording competition this year. So
for recording I use my iPhone. That's easy.
Do you plug in a mic for that, or?
No, I do have 2 mics stereo, but I don't plug in a mic for this, also because it's one that doesn't have a socket for this, right? But I don't really do sound recordings. Mostly I do more visual stuff.
Oh yeah.
So then for that it's sufficient. But the iPhone 16 came out yesterday, and that has 4 microphones on board for spatial recording. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, I do want to say something about sound walks, because I have a slightly from left field comment here, but you don't have to be walking. You know, when I was first invited to do this talk, I thought, well, I don't know if I've done any sound walks, you know, but I would say there's all sorts of like journeys that you can do. You don't have to be just walking. I mean, I've done things on a bike tour. You can be on a boat, on a kayak. I did a long distance transatlantic sailing trip once, very early days, and I didn't have the gear or the windshielding to make a good job of that. But I've done sound walks where I went vertically. So I went up from the ground to the top of the treetops, the canopy of a rainforest. I climbed a canopy tower at dawn, and I recorded at every 10-foot stage, and that's one of the pieces on my Instagram series. I think it's what episode is it? It's hang on, I'll tell you, because I can send links out that you can listen to later if you're interested. Yeah, episode 9 of In the Sound Field, which is on my website of that name and also on Instagram. That is a rainforest canopy climb. So I would challenge the notion that you have to actually be walking. You could be moving in some other way. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a walk. Having said that,
yeah, but having said that, before we sort of came on air with everybody on the cafe, you were actually saying, I wouldn't say quite the opposite, but you were saying that you needed motion to move the piece along. Kind of thing. So come on, tell us a bit more. How have you built motion into the pieces that you've made?
Well, the Shanghai piece, both the Shanghai Sounds Guide, audio guide itself, and Here Be Dragons, which is on Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's still up, and it's also on my portfolio page of my dianehope.com website. I can post a link to that in a minute. Walking around, but you how to construct a narrative. There's got to be some motion, and it can be both in the story and moving physically, or you can be moving, you know, but primarily it can be a guided walk or some other kind of tour. It doesn't just have to be, you don't have to be just walking and going somewhere, but you do have to have, I think, a sense of motion, whether it's physically, you can hear some motion and get a sense of a journey, or in a story that has to carry it through. And I just use a lot of location recordings in my pieces, because I really want to make audio pieces that are not just for people that might go to a place and explore, and I have done a few of those. One of the links that can be made available is a link to a piece I did for Arizona Watchable Wildlife Experience. I did a whole series of guides for them, but one of them in particular was a driving tour, where you drove down a particular road and you stopped at particular places, then you had the option to get out and walk. And it was giving you a lot of background to the wildlife. And the other element of movement I was dealing with there is seasonal change, because you can make an audio guide to going round a place for a particular season. But if it's something in particular like wildlife, it's going to be different in every season. So how to incorporate that. And I actually dealt with that in this guide to Mormon Lake, it's called. So that's quite a long piece. It's about 20 minutes long, but I don't know if you can send, I can send a whole list of links after the event, Andrew, that if people would be interested in hearing those. And I've just given a little example of, you know, or a little comment on what kind of a movement was. So, you know, from rainforest canopy climb. And one of the pieces I made for Obsessed with the Quest on BBC Radio 4 that aired at the beginning of this year, and then they repeated it more recently. One lassie that I did in 14 minutes was a 10,000-mile bicycle tour that she'd done with the monarch butterfly migration. And that there is an extreme example of having to condense a long journey into like 13 minutes, 40 to 45 seconds. And so there's ways of dealing with that, but there is that sense of movement or going on a trip. And then another one of those pieces was a vertical descent. This guy who had been to the 5 deepest places in the world oceans, the first person to go to all 5. And he described one of his descents down to the Marianas Trench. So that was kind of it wasn't a sound walk, but it was a vertical journey with, you know. So I would say broaden your you know, the scope of what might be considered an audio journey or an audio tour. It doesn't just have to be based around walking, stopping at various places and giving people some interesting information or telling them a cool story or introducing them to historical or oral history information or modern day, oral history, if you like, or modern day events. It could be all sorts of different types of journey. And I would say always record when you're going around. Always be ready to record any sound that might pop up. It might not be an obvious reason why you're recording that at the time, but it might come in really useful later, and not necessarily for that particular project.
So also tell me, do you use music at all? Do you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you do to bed and keep the pace going. Yeah.
Not always. If you listen to the piece Intimate Expanse, which is, this is another one of the links I've got up there. It's a guide to a place called Cane Ranch on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, but it's from the point of view of several different artists. And that's one where I use their voices and soundscapes. And that's maybe, you know, there are pieces I've done which don't use music, but when I get the chance, I love to mix music in. So on the portfolio page of my website, dianehope.com portfolio page, I mean, those big, bigger pieces that I did for outlets like BBC, I mixed a lot of sound, a lot of music in there. So typically my piece, if I get the chance, it will be a mixture of guest interviews, ambient sound to locate you in a space, and music. And I've given a whole talk on this to UCAN in the past about, using those 3 elements and how to find the best of all 3, get the best out of all 3 elements. The problem is that BBC used to cover all the copyright, issues with music, and you could use anything, but now you have to be more careful. But there are many good composers out there. If you need music that's rights free, you can actually, sometimes it's cost effective if you've got a bit of a budget to pay someone to compose music for you. I just had a request about that from someone who said, oh, can you do some music composition for this piece? And I'm like, no, well, that's not really what I'm not very good at it, but I can suggest you people that do, So yeah, but music isn't always relevant. I mean, was it Ed's piece what we heard where the musicians were kind of coming at the walkers and then going by them? That's so wonderful. That's just wonderful, that. Yeah.
Ed, do you want to mention that, or do you want to, because some people weren't here last week, do you want to?
That's a clip that I played in the cafe last week. It was a GPS triggered audio walk in the woods, and just at the very beginning you meet the 2 narrators who are either side of you, who are going to walk with you for this walk, and just as they're sort of saying hello and introducing themselves, some nice introductory music kicks in, but it's not just a track that's overlaid. It was a bunch of people on their instruments kind of ambling past you. The double bassist goes past on your left and the banjo player goes past on your right, and they kind of say hello under their breath as they play, as they walk past you. So that's the bit that Diane's referring to.
Yeah, and this is wonderful because it was using music, but like in the real time of that particular moment, and you really get a sense of the spatial element as they walk by. So just wonderful, very creative, and so yeah.
So
I have used field recordings and mixed music with field recordings, and it's quite difficult. I think there's very few composers that I've met that are good at actually mixing field sound into as part of the musical elements. Often you'll hear a little bit of field recording at the beginning, and then it morphs into just more typical music. But it is possible to make beats and things with field sound, and I did do a bit of that on Intimate Expanse.
Okay, so Lucy, you asked a question about dummy heads. Do you want to explain or at least ask the question yourself?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm really interested in like how heavy they are, because the one that I can have access to through uni is like one of those wooden ones that's carved and weighs a ton. You can just about get it out the building and put it somewhere. But I want to do the kind of, instead of the microphones in my ears, I want to have them in a dummy head so that I can actually use my own head to look around and make sure I'm not about to fall over or something like that.
Yeah, so you want to maybe mount a dummy head on like a version of a boom pole or something, just so you can move it around, but not too long. So you can get them from shops that sell hairdressing or wig products. You can get these polystyrene ones, Lucy, that weigh virtually nothing. And what you would do is you would just get a pair, preferably a matched pair of miniature mics, and you would tape them onto the side of that polystyrene dummy head and use that.
So I actually tried to do a DIY version of that, and I just found actually the polystyrene head, maybe I hadn't mounted it properly on something. It was literally like a sort of screwdriver shoved in the bottom, and I was holding the bottom, but I found it quite squeaky.
That is the problem with polystyrene. Yeah, if you can't find a non-noisy way of doing that, there are other kinds of dummy heads that are kind of hairdressers dummy heads. I do have one for sale at the moment. I'm not sure if it would be cost effective to ship it to London or whatever, because I'm in Arizona, but I can certainly, if you want to send me your email, I can certainly send you a picture of it and we could talk about that. But you would still have to find a way of fixing a handle onto the bottom of it. But there are other types of dummy heads that are not polystyrene. They're not super heavy, and that might work better for you.
So you've not bought proper recording ones. You've always just adapted ones like models for hairdressing and hairdressing.
Yes, yeah. So when I looked into it, there was this thing just coming out when I first wanted to get into that. It was called, someone mentioned it earlier, the 3DO. I can't remember if you wear that or not. I think you can have it on a handle. And then the only other ones that I knew about were the Neumann ones that cost $8,000. That looks like a crash test dummy head that have the microphones actually built into the head. And if you don't have, your institution doesn't have one of those for you to use, and I don't know how heavy they are, but flock covered.
Thank you.
But just put your email in the chat or something, Lucy, if you want me to message you later. And
well, I'll send a message. Thanks.
What I was going to say is, well, one of the things I've found which is fascinating is that when I'm recording people on a walk, and I've edited it and published it, is that the listeners I have often say that they actually like the ambient sounds that I've recorded because it makes them feel more as though they're on the walk with the person that I'm walking with. And so therefore, it's kind of weird. It's a cheat's way of not having to do much editing. You can just sort of keep the crunch, crunch, and shuffle, shuffle noises in the background. But I'm not sure whether the BBC or Australian broadcasting would actually settle for that. They probably want something a lot cleaner. I'd be interested to know what others feel about that, about what you leave in and what you don't leave in when it comes to recording ambient sounds. And does anyone leave anything in or clean them all up? I mean, how do you do it, Di?
Oh, well, I highly edit my sounds, Andrew. Very, very rarely would I use, I mean, the thing is, what is footstep crunching conveying? I mean, you want it lightly in the background if it's relevant to a sound walk, but if you're trying to get a story across and content across, I would say that it just gets a bit old to have that sound of crunching feet all the time. So I would edit that kind of stuff out, and I would put other ambient location sounds in that that evoke the sense of place. I very rarely just use raw recordings just without working on them and just really, really cleaning them up. So if you go and listen to any of those in the sound field, they've been worked on a fair bit. They're not just raw recordings. And even like the Rainforest Canopy Climb, episode 9, I mentioned that you might hear mic bumps, but actually, because I thought you would, but actually you can't really hear them. I mean, one of them I did, I think it was episode, I don't know, I can't remember, 12 or something. I went on a motorcycles around, on the back of motorcycles and scooters around Seoul and Shanghai. And the whole point of that was just to record the sound of motorcycles and scooters going through, navigating traffic, stopping at lights, that just to give you the idea of zooming around the streets and so the mode of transport there was the sound. So I left it in there because that was the sound. But I would just get really, I mean, there's this one piece I heard recently, Catherine Girard, she's in San Francisco. She's made a lovely series called Above the Fog, which is also in the notes that I can send around for everybody. I wonder if I can find it now. Anyway, one of her episodes, she did a walking tour, and you can hear some of the footsteps occasionally, and she has interviews with people, and you can hear the ambient sound, and you really get the feel when you've listened to that piece. Here it is. The particular, I'll just put it in the chat here. You really get the feeling that you've been on the walk with her. Do you know what I mean? I can't get rid of this. I have to find something else.
Like Babak found it.
Yeah, Babak's already put it in, so don't worry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, anyway, yeah, that walking in circles, I think that's a lovely example. You get those sounds of walking from time to time, footsteps, but they don't intrude, they don't dominate. And then she mixes that with the sounds of her talking, explaining things, and interviews with people that were on the walk with her. I think that's a really nice example of how you can use that kind of sound you were talking about, Andrew, and leave in the natural foot crunching from time to time. But I think you don't want to get sloppy about it. Otherwise, it becomes hard to listen to if it's kind of too dominating.
Yeah. No,
I don't know about you, but one of the things I don't like about cycling or walking on continually on gravel tracks is my ears get very tired of that crunch, crunch, crunch sound, because you have to stop to hear anything around you, because it's just kind of muffling a lot of the quieter sounds around you. I find it quite irritating.
No, I mean, the one time that it got really difficult for me was I was interviewing someone who picks things up from a shingle beach. And so you'd get the sound of them walking on the shingle beach, and then they'd stop and they'd pick something up, and then you have a kind of conversation, then they walk on a bit further, and it kind of worked, but it was actually hard work, because if you edited out a bit of vocal, you suddenly realize that the crunch wasn't, it didn't work. It's like someone had taken a misstep and they might have fallen over. So yeah, what
I do with that is I'd make sure get people to record, a lot of the guest interview standing still, and then I'd have some of the crunch, but I'd almost make that into a sonic motif. you know, to separate segments of the walk or to indicate transitions or movement. But I would definitely get people to stand still while they were recording important bits of dialogue there. Yeah, because that's loud, those kind of shingle beaches. It's really loud. Yeah, yeah. And I would say, I don't know, this was touched on last week, but I think you have to, it's really good if you can to do a fair bit of research if you're doing an actual sound walk, and that you have to do lots of return visits, you know, often to get the best location sound, and also just to research the place and hear what it sounds like at different times of day or whatever. When I was doing that Shanghai piece, there was a bird and insect market, believe it or not. I don't know if it's still there because a lot of the areas I went round got redeveloped. But I had to go back 3 times before I got recordings I was happy with in that bird and insect market. And I talked to another sound artist who was in residence who would partly overlap with me. She was Italian, really talented person. And she'd found the same thing. She'd had to go back three or four times to get the sounds that she was happy with from there. So don't feel, you know, good if you go out, you know, and you try and get location sound and it's not very good the first time. You just might have to make several visits to get something that is really either iconic or representative of a location.
Okay, so has anyone else got topics that they want to discuss? You know, so do put them in the chat, or better still, just jump in and ask a question, because there aren't that many of us. So, oh, Anne-Marie, brilliant, there we go.
Hi, I did pop this in the chat, but I think it got lost with all the other things. I just wanted to, you know, I know you do coaching, so you don't have to give away all your trade secrets.
I don't want to, no.
In terms of adding narrative to your sound pieces, you mentioned Motion. Obviously, that's a great device, but are there any other devices, you know, a couple of devices that you would say are quite useful for adding to create narrative?
A lot of the time in the sound field, I'm talking about a sound. So there's either a history of a sound or my adventure to get the sound. What we did with Angel Perez Grande in his piece, Echoes from the Barn, he was saying, I've got all these great sound recordings. How do I make a story out of one of them? And I said, tell me about one of your favorite sounds. And he said, well, you know, we just moved from Ireland recently to the Midlands, but in our house in Ireland, we had this barn with swallows nesting in it every summer. And I got wonderful recordings. And then, you know, he said they disappear. They raise their young and you watch them and they disappear. And, you know, my children grew up there. You know, we had our family there. And I'm like, well, that's the story then, isn't it? There's this wonderful parallel between you having your family there and raising your brood and the swallows raising theirs. So
yeah, so the history of the sound itself, or why a sound, you're attracted to a particular sound.
Yeah, or the story. I mean, if you go and listen to episode 35 on In the Soundfield, Sardinian Sheep Chase, I was on Sardinia for 2.5 weeks late last autumn, and I heard these sheep and goat bells tinkling in the distance, and it turned out to be a nightmare to try and get a clean recording because they were guarded by sheepdogs. They were usually quite a long way away, and when they were near a road, as you'll hear in the piece, there was bloody traffic, and if it wasn't traffic going by on the road, there was a lot of planes flying around the coast of the island coming into land at Cagliari, you know. And I gave up. The morning I was leaving, I happened to be cycling just down the road near where I've been saying to take my trash and recycling out before I left. And the whole flock was right by the road with the shepherd, no guard dog. So I had to race back to the house and shove the iPhone with the, you know, the headset on, race back there. And I had this, well, you'll hear it in the story anyway, but you know, 2 hours before I left, got the perfect recording.
Yeah.
And that was the story. That's why it was
the timing as well. Yeah.
That's why it was a sheep, because I felt like I'd been chasing them around, and I was on an e-bike. I'd rented an e-bike and I was going around, and you know, here and there I'd hear them, and there was one field I kept going back to. Just couldn't get that key recording, and then I did. So that, and I thought about that, you know, as I was traveling on the bus back to Cagliari and then flying home, I was like, that's the story. And I hear that often, you know, sometimes it's just describing the sound itself. Like there's one episode called Binaural Freight Train, and I literally I'd recorded the sound of the freight trains here so much. I made a whole program, which you'll find on the portfolio page of dianehope.com, called When the Whistle Blows. I made a whole program for BBC Radio 4 about the sound of the American freight train horn, why it sounds like it does, the history of the development of that sound, and the safety aspects. And I recorded that sound a lot, but in the sound field, I just literally present the sound, you know, and I don't say too much about it. That little piece is basically about listening to the sound with, you know, not with very minimal dialogue. So depends what the story is. Is the story more about a spoken narrative, or is it about the sound itself, or is it an interplay of the two? Let me know if you like some coaching, or if you've got some project we could work on together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say we've got someone based in Adelaide, and he does poodle walks, and he actually puts a mic on the collar of his poodle, and occasionally records the sounds you know, that the poodle picks up, you know, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I did have
anyway,
someone contact me once. They're saying they wanted to record from the dog's eye view what the dog heard going for a walk, and I thought it was such a cool idea. I think, and I've heard of people putting microphones on horses' legs or hooves as well to get really close mic sounds of that. Someone I heard of was going ice skating or rollerblading and wanted to mic up their ice skates or their rollerblades. There's all sorts of creative things you can do, but there's often technical challenges to work out, because, you know, you think, oh, that's a great idea, but then putting your mic on a dog, you end up, you know, you get lots of, I don't know, rustle from the fur on the coat rubbing. You do have to do a fair bit of pilot testing.
Okay, well, so Diane, you covered loads and loads of stuff. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is which part of the process of making is the bit that really gets you excited? Is it the, you know, the research? Is it the recording? Is it the editing? Is it the putting the production together? What's the bit that, you know, makes you want to go, wow? Or do you just love all of it?
I can tell you what I least like, and that's that final engineering thing, because I'm not very good at that, adjusting all the levels and making sure everything's kind of layered properly, you know, with the right sound levels. The rest of it, depending on what it is, I really enjoy. So it can be the research, can be really interesting. The podcast series I've been writing and researching scripts for, called Unexplained, has been fascinating. I haven't done any audio work with that one, just research and scripting, and I love it because some of the topics are so cool. I knew nothing about. I mean, the long-term history of the search for the Loch Ness Monster, I just didn't know how much had been done, how far back it went. Does the wind drive people mad was another episode. I had no idea that there was this effect of winds, especially in certain geographic regions, and how that affected people, just stuff like that. I'm researching one on vampires at the moment, and I just found some really old material and some really recent material, so that's going to be a cool one. Sound recording, it can be bliss. Like when I finally got in the middle of that sheep flock on Sardinia and got that binaural recording and the tinkling bells, it's just, love it, bliss moment. Sometimes I go out and try and record something, and it's nothing but frustration. So for me, the location recording can be any end of the spectrum. Editing, I really, really like editing dialogue most of the time. Although if you have a difficult speaker, someone who's very long-winded, or there's some other reason it's difficult, that can be frustrating. I do love the mix, actually, weaving in the elements. I do love that. I love to find a sound engineer partner, so I can who I can work together with, someone who loves doing the technical elements of making it sound, the sound engineering mix sound great, so I can give them rough mixes, and you know, we can kind of interface. I'd love to find a regular person to work with on projects who's good at that, because like I say, that the technical aspects right at the end, I don't enjoy so much.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Has anyone else got any questions in the chat or not? Or are we sort of, that's the kind of point that we might just...
Ed?
Yeah, go for it, Ed.
Question, Diane. You mentioned earlier, right at the start, you mentioned in the field, and you said it's an Instagram page, and there's the website, which kind of works as a blog.
In the sound field, yeah.
Yeah, in the sound field, and you were like, oh, I haven't got an RSS feed yet. I need to set that up. And I thought that was quite interesting, and I wanted to ask you if you could say a bit more about that. You didn't go like RSS first, like you sounds like you're sort of Instagram first, kind of.
Yeah.
And like,
because,
talk about why. Was that a deliberate choice, and why?
It's just because I didn't really have the time to look into how I made an RSS feed. And if someone is really good at that and wants to do a skills share, and educate me or how to do that in exchange for some kind of coaching or something, or a bit of sound design, I'd love to hook up with you. But I didn't have the time to look into it, and I didn't want it to feel like work. I wanted it to be joyful. And also I got the sense that Instagram is a really popular medium, especially amongst under 50s and under 40s generation. And so I thought, and I often don't have video to go with my sounds, honestly, and I just can't multitask. I can either focus on the sound or the visuals. I'm really not good at doing both, and I don't have a regular collaborator who does great video that I could work with. So Instagram was the obvious thing, and I've only got all the episodes up on the website very recently. Yeah, and I did try posting some episodes on I made a YouTube channel, but I don't think you get much traction on YouTube without visuals. And so, yeah, it was just because it was the easy and fun thing to do, really, Ed, and because I didn't have the time and the technical expertise to get it set up and get it streaming on Apple and all that stuff. You know, I'd love to, and and honestly, I don't know much about that, because a lot of the productions that I've done have been for outfits that don't need that. Because if you're making for the local NPR station or for Australian National Radio or BBC, you don't need to worry about your RSS. So I've never really had to go into that in any detail. You know, because usually the clients I'm working for have already got an outlet medium, and so I've never had to learn it. So it's kind of laziness or lack of technical ability.
No, that's great. Okay, now that's a good point. And okay, I actually think generating a feed is pretty easy, an RSS feed. So there's something, it's a free app, it's called FeedBurner. You could just use it for that. You just put the URL in, it'll generate an RSS feed for you.
Oh, it will.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's a big skills swap there. I think.
Oh, okay.
You don't need to worry. It's, just Google it, and you'll find all sorts of options. As I say, this cafe's been very interactive. Diana insisted that she didn't want to do a kind of presentation and share screen. She just wanted to pitch in and get going. So. Diane, you get the last word.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate being invited. Yeah, I'll send Andrew a list of links to what I would very loosely describe as what might classify as a sound walk from my portfolio, and just dip in and out of those, anything that you feel is interesting. I thought I'd rather do it that way rather than enforce listening of particular pieces on you, just to click on any links you think look interesting and listen in your own time. And for the longer pieces, like Here Be Dragons or something like that, that's almost 30 minutes long, you don't necessarily need to listen to the whole thing all the way through unless you want to. You can just kind of, to try some random places and just see what you're hearing. That's what I recommend. Just listen to it all the way through if you feel moved. But the Instagram pieces, I'm deliberately keeping those at no more than 5 minutes long, and quite a few of them are just 1 minute long. And it's a wonderful skill to learn to edit down to that length, because I used to despise 1 minute long, very short audio pieces, and I've got to really love that format. So good test of a good way to hone your editing and mixing skills, getting pieces boiled down to the essentials.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Diane, and thanks to everyone for coming along this evening.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.